Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Mid Suffolk District Council's Development Planning Referrals Committee meeting. First of all, can I just remind you of some of the domestic arrangements? Please ensure that microphones are muted when you're not speaking. Please do not interrupt other speakers, and members are reminded not to use messaging or chat functions or emojis during the meeting, unless it is to report a pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest, or to notify myself that you wish to make a proposal. Members are reminded that they should not have alternative communication lines open, i.e. Teams chat, and that if you are contacted by a third party during an application that's being presented or debated, you should please bring this to the attention of our legal advisor. Can I remind you that if you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave the meeting. Additionally, you'll be invited to speak and ask questions by the chair of the meeting. Please await your turn. We will not be using the hands up function except for declarations of interests or site visit requests or declarations of lobbying and questions of clarity. We will be using electronic voting for today's meeting. If you do experience any poor connection issues in the first instance, can you try turning your camera off? If this does not work, please turn off all incoming videos. The options to find these are under the 3 dots at the bar at the top of the screen. I'd like to remind everyone present this meeting will be broadcast live on the internet and will be capable of repeated viewings. The whole of the meeting is recorded, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make any representations to this meeting, you'll be deemed by the council to have consented to having been recorded. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you're also consenting to being recorded by the council and to the possible use of those sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The council, members of the public and press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. So just want to quickly run through some introductions of who we have joining us today. First of all, Ian Duprez, our legal advisor. Good morning, Ian. Are you with us? Yeah, good morning. Thank you. Robert Carmichael, who's our governance officer. Good morning, Robert. Joe Hobbs, who's the case officer, and Philip Isbell, the chief planning officer. Good morning to you both. And the ward members are Councillor Tim Passmore and Councillor John Whitehead. So without further ado, I'm going to move straight on to the agenda. Agenda item number 1 is apologies for absence and substitutions. Can I now ask the governance officer to do a roll call, please, and confirm any absences, because we can't substitute for this meeting.
Present.
Present. Present.
Present.
Present.
Present.
Present.
Present.
Present. Present.
Present.
Present.
Thanks very much. Okay, and agenda item number 2 is to receive declarations of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest by members. Do we have any? No, that's none. Okay, can I just ask everyone to go on mute, because there's a lot of background hissing. There we go, thank you. Okay, agenda item number 3 is declarations of lobbying. Are there any declarations that members wish to declare? If so, please could you raise your hands? Okay, I take that as none received. Thank you. Agenda item number 4 is declarations of personal site visits. Does anyone need to declare any personal site visits? Councillor Mansell? Yep, thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you, Chair. I believe I declared that I had visited the site when we discussed this at the previous planning referrals meeting. I haven't made any further visits, but I don't know whether that needs to be noted.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Nope. Okay, thank you for that. Agenda item number 5 is confirmation of the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of January. A draft is to be cleaned of these minutes, so they're not yet to be decided at today's meeting, but they will come forward to the next meeting. Okay, agenda item number 6, to receive any notifications of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme. Do we have any? Okay, next is to move on to the schedule of the planning application before us. So it's DC 18-00861, land east of Ely Road in Claydon. I'd now like to invite the case officer, Joe Hobbs, to introduce the application to the committee. Thank you, Joe. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Bear with me 1 moment while the presentation loads up. And can you see that screen there, Chair?
Not yet.
Okay, just give it a second. The internet connection is slightly slow sometimes. Perhaps just let me know when you can see the slide.
Yes, I can see it.
Fantastic. Great. Okay. Okay, so thank you, Chair. The application before members this morning is an application which was considered by Referrals Committee on the 27th of January of this year. I will go through the presentation again, as not all members were present for the previous application, and also the scheme has been amended, so I will give a thorough presentation this morning. And members will see in their committee bundle there's a committee report presenting the changes to the scheme, and the original committee report is appended in the committee bundle appendices. I wanted to draw out the changes that have been made to the proposal for clarity. So the committee report is slightly shorter, but then for completeness, we've completed the conclusion just to draw in all the different factors of the application. So the conclusion is in the shorter committee report is for the entire scheme. So hopefully that gives members a flavour of the recommendation now. So to the proposals. The application, it's an outline application with only access being considered today, but there are some indicative plans within the application to give members an idea of how the development could come forwards in the proposals. The proposals are now for 67 dwellings, open space, ecology enhancements and infrastructure. And the site is land east of Ely Road in Claydon. So just go through, can I just check, can you see the second slide now that says history of application?
Yes, we can. It's
Fantastic.
coming through.
Checking it's keeping up with what I can see. So just quickly run through the history of the application. The application was originally considered in 2018 and the committee asked for it to be taken to Referrals Committee with a number of matters to be clarified. The applicant at that point amended the scheme to make significant improvements to the ecology, biodiversity and landscaping of the scheme. I'll show you in plans shortly. And undertook a cumulative transport assessment with the nearby proposed development on Norwich Road by Pigeon Investment Management that members resolved to approve at the last committee for 269 dwellings and primary school site and other matters. So that cumulative transport assessment was undertaken and further mitigation measures secured. And again, I'll show you those at the end of this presentation. So members considered this application on the 27th of January and the resolution was mileage refused due to poor design and impact of construction and future residential traffic on residential amenity. So it's shortly summarised slightly. The applicants have now amended the scheme to reduce from 73 dwellings to 67 dwellings, reducing the density from 22 to 20 dwellings per hectare gross. They've relocated and increased the number of single-storey dwellings on site. I will show you those, or bungalows. I will show you those on the plan shortly. And they've increased the rough grassland buffer area around the site and given an indication of the biodiversity net gain calculations, which provisionally show to be over 15%. So I'll just run through those in a bit too. So just to go through the site location, so it's border location, the A14 and Ipswich. Just maybe 1 second, I'm just going to put the pointer on so you can see where I'm pointing. There we go. And here we have the application site within Claydon Barham, and just to show the parish boundaries shown there in green. So we have the north of the application site in orange is in Barham, and the south is in the parish of Claydon and Witton. And just the brown line there showing the existing development boundary adjacent to the site. So just to give some indication of the roads around, the site is accessed by Ely Road, which is just shown here, And we have Barham Church Lane just to the north of the site. And here we have Hereford Drive and Exeter Road. They feature in the committee reports, just pointing these two out. And we have Thornhill Road, which connects to Ely Road and Barham Lane. And just to show the public rights of way, we have the bridle way, which goes across the north of the site, shown in yellow there, and a footpath which goes down outside the site, but along the east side of the site. So just to try and show the access to the site, I just wanted to show this slide here. The yellow dot shows vehicle movements to and from the site. And I just wanted to kind of go through, based on the concerns raised at last committee, the way that traffic could move through Claydon to get to the main road and obviously go north or south. So just to show the first route, we've got Edinburgh Gardens, York Crescent, and to the main road. Also, York Crescent, you can travel to the north if you want to go into Barham Village Centre. But also there is access via Thornhill Road to the north and Barham Church Lane, where vehicle traffic could go. And also with the resolution to grant consent on the site to the north, that plan is just showing in there. We have the Spine Road, which has been permitted, which connects to Thornhill Road. So in due course, as this scheme comes forwards, obviously residents will also be able to travel out through that improved road to get to the village and different locations. So there are a number of routes through the village that the different traffic could take. And I think, as we've often said before, traffic is kind of like water. It will find the route of least resistance when it travels through an area. And if there are delays, it will try and find the quickest route through. So I think we can discuss further with Highway Authority present at the meeting if needed later in discussion. But I just wanted to draw out those different routes through the village. So just to run through the constraints, just to make members aware, there's a tree with tree preservation order on the north boundary of the site there, and some other trees just outside the site shown in dark green, and with the boundary as shown earlier. This was a matter which was raised at the previous committee meeting in 2018, just showing the location of Barham Quarry quite far from the site. The site is in the mineral safeguarding area, and there's an appropriate condition just to make sure that we quantify any minerals that are found on site to address the requirements of Suffolk County Council's Minerals and Waste. So here we have the amended sketch layout. Just to show the current proposals, this was the original proposals 2018. I'll scoot through these. The red areas show areas of key change where the scheme has been amended, just to pull back from the key landscape features across the site, the hedge and the ecology mitigation areas and that protected tree. And so the previous proposals shown to members in January were these. And then if we just go through to the next area, these show the current proposals. Now, what I will show you in a moment is the parameter plan, which shows the changes a little bit more clearly. But still, we have the main access into Ely Road here and development indicatively shown, I must add, in these locations here. There is a parameter plan, but this particular layout is not set, as it is only outline. It is only the access that members are considering today. But this has just been shown how the development can be accommodated, taking account of all the different restrictions and constraints on the site. Here, the parameter plan, this shows the proposals a little bit more clearly and how they've changed since members last saw it in January. So this was the previous parameter plan shown in January. We've got the yellow areas, the ecological mitigation buffer zones, green open space. Sorry, these are the plans. These are the plans as proposed now. My apologies. These are the new plans, just to make it clear to members. These are the new plans because previously the single-storey element of the site was all located to the south, where now there are two areas of single-storey dwellings proposed, one next to Hereford Drive and Exeter Road, and one next to Winchester Gardens, which was an area that members had of concern. Sorry, bear with me one moment. This plan here, apologies members, this plan here is the previous one that you saw in January. So here we have the single-storey dwellings to the south of the site with that area shown in orange. These areas in red are the areas that the applicants have changed since you last saw the plans in January. So I'm just going to run through these individually. But the first area is the single-storey dwellings are now proposed in this location as well, next to Winchester Gardens rather than previously two-storey dwellings. We have increase in the ecology mitigation buffer zone just in this red area here, and this red area here, and this red area here. And so just to run through the proposals one by one, the number of dwellings is reduced to 67 dwellings the density is reduced to 20 dwellings per hectare gross, and that's 30 dwellings per hectare net, as you'll see in the committee report. Single-storey development has been relocated. There has been an increase in the number of bungalows on the scheme from the previous one. There were 8 presented before, and now there's 10, so that's 15% of the total. So that's a positive benefit, positive change since January. Those buffer areas have been increased just to try and create a bit more space. I'll show you those shortly. And an indicative a report has been submitted showing that it looks most likely possible that we can secure biodiversity net gain 15% on the site. We haven't thoroughly tested this report. It's just a piece of information the applicants have submitted, but it seems entirely feasible with the amount of ecological benefits and mitigation measures that this scheme does secure. And that's quite a positive figure, as our emerging joint local plan seeks schemes to secure 10% biodiversity net gain, as does the emerging environment bill. So it does show that the scheme will achieve a good gain for biodiversity, and certainly the proposals, the parameter plan does indicate that will be possible. Also, the visitor parking has increased on site just to create some more space for visitors where possible. So just to transition the plans through from the previous, this is the previous, and then before your eyes, it's just going to change slightly to the proposed. It's very difficult to see the exact changes when you see that transition, but the buffer areas have increased in those red areas that I showed you before, and pushed the development up slightly north as well, just to create a little bit more space for nature. But the key changes obviously are the reduction in numbers and the single storey elements being in 2 locations, which could be secured through planning condition to make sure that the parameter plan is adhered to, and that they say single storey dwellings in perpetuity through removal of permitted development rights for upward extensions. So just to look at the plans, I won't go through these in too much detail. This is just the indicative site layout, just a little bit more close-up detail, just to show how the site could come forwards. The applicants have shown that there could be an access road provided through to the site to the north. I will come on to that shortly in the emerging joint local plan. I'm just showing the potential layouts to the south of the site. And then here's the parameter plan, just a little bit more close-up detail. Okay, and some cross sections which the applicants have provided, just showing how the site could look, and just particularly with that section BB. Looking south, you see the single storey elements and then the slight raise inland as we go through. And just for members' information, the details of the proposed access way into the site as well. We can look at that in more detail if needed. Just to run through video, this is turning from Barham Church Lane into Thornhill Road, and travelling down to the site, Ely Road access. And here we can just see the site in the distance, and the access just in front of us there. And this video is of the opposite direction, so we've got the site entrance behind us. And here we are just going along Thornhill Road towards Edinburgh Gardens, which is one of the routes I showed you earlier with those yellow dots. And just turning into Edinburgh Gardens. And the video descends at the bottom of Edinburgh Gardens when we meet York Crescent. There we go. And just to run through some photos of the site now, this is just looking around the northern part of the site with the access point behind us. Just see the incline of the site there as you move to the east boundary of the site, those mature trees in the background. And then here's the southern part of the site. You can see Hereford Way, Exeter Road, Hereford Drive in the background. That gives you an indication of the raise in the land levels as well as you look across the site. Just look through some photos. I've got the photo location in the bottom right-hand corner of the slide, just showing the access there into from Ely Road. And there's Winchester Gardens just along the north-west boundary of the site. Here we have the public right-of-way that comes through the site, mature trees on the edge there. And this is just looking across from the northern part of the site. Just had a more recent photo, obviously some of the photos are slightly older. The site is currently in agricultural use. This is just taken for the public right of way. Just showing that relationship there with Winchester Gardens. And a site photo just looking across to the south of the site. And Hereford Drive. And just a footpath that runs outside of the site boundaries, just to the east there. And this viewpoint is just taken from the application site, the Pigeon Investment Management application site. You can see where the red dot is now, that is the application site. This is the land to the north, which there are no proposals on at present. So now I'm just going to run through the key issues, the key benefits, and just draw the matters out slightly into the that have been drawn through in the committee report. The key harms in planning terms: we have conflict with the current development plan, we're outside the built-up area boundary, we have tension with those key policies, core strategy 1 and 2, and H7 of the local plan. We have some landscape impacts, I'll show you those shortly in another plan, and we do have loss of grade 3 agricultural land, although it's not known whether it's 3A, best most versatile, or 3B, as testing hasn't been done, but it is grade 3 agricultural land. The key benefits: the scheme is 67 dwellings, 35% affordable, which would be 23 units. As the site is in a good sustainable location, well connected to an existing core village that has services, primary schools and such like, and good sustainable transport connection routes. The scheme proposed has good ecology mitigation enhancement measures, and that biodiversity net gain looks to be a good figure, as shown indicatively from the information submitted. The public rights of way improvements are secured to resurface and improve the public rights of way around the site, and a number of highway improvements in Claydon, which I will run through just in separate slides shortly. Just to show some of the context of the local services, the village, we have the primary school and we have Claydon High School just shown here, and we have some shops in the village core just where I'm hovering here at present. And also we are in general context of the district in a good location with sustainable transport connections and the ability to cycle into Ipswich and to other areas of employment. So in the general context of our district, this is a good sustainable location and accessible to those different services and employment areas that people need to get to. On the emerging joint local plan, obviously this has limited weight at present, but just to draw out the fact that the application site outlined in red is within an emerging allocation in the local plan, but it doesn't take up the whole of the emerging allocation site, which is something that we discussed at the last committee. The whole of the proposed allocation there is shown in blue, and so the application site is only across part of that. I will just go through the surrounding consents, because this is something which we didn't cover in the previous meeting. This is land to the south of the application site, so the application site is just up here, and consent has been granted for 9 bungalows on this land to the south. So just to show it on the context of the wider map there, here we have the proposed development members are considering today that has just appeared. And there we have just to the south the permitted 9 dwellings, and that is the wider site allocation. Now, I know this was a matter that members did have concerns on the previous application, that we have an emerging allocation for 74 dwellings across this wider area here. And clearly here we have a proposal of 67 dwellings and 9 dwellings permitted, and with the potential for further dwellings coming forwards on this land to the north, although we have no applications indicating that at present. I think at this point, my advice to members is that we need to make a decision in terms of the current development plan. The joint local plan, it has limited weight, and the phrase we often like to use is a direction of travel as to where we will accommodate our housing requirements in the most sustainable locations. But at present, the allocations, they haven't been tested at examination, so we can't give them more weight. And that's the process that needs to go through. And for the purpose of this planning application, we can't get into the kind of the details of the allocation, because that's a matter for the examination of the plan. The only thing that we can do today, and what members are advising you, is that we have to make a decision against the current development plan and what that requires of us to consider whether this is a good form of development, whether it meets the development plan, or whether there are other material considerations that compel us to recommend approval. And I will draw on that conclusion when I get to the end of the presentation. But hopefully that gives members us that information as to what's happening on the wider emerging allocation. So just to show the public rights-of-way improvements, these are the footpaths that will be improved by the financial contributions secured outlined to members in the committee report. And there are a number of ecological mitigation measures which the applicants have identified, which have helped us to really see how they will be beneficial compared to the existing agricultural use of the scheme, how there would be space for nature and how there would be enhancements to really improve that kind of biodiversity and the kind of quality of the environment for the existing protected and priority species in the area. The landscape impact that I mentioned earlier, there's major moderate landscape harm along the public footpath here and for the residents of surrounding the site, just because obviously at present there is an open field and it would lead to built form, obviously blocking those views, limiting those views, but there have been proposals to show that that is limited insofar as possible along the public footpath by really pulling development away to kind of give people a bit more of a sense of space than they would have if there were rear fences certainly along that site, and that's something that we can secure through the parameter plan. And also now we have obviously single-storey dwellings in this location, which also reduce that impact to a degree from the residents and their amenity in Winchester Gardens. And just to show, although there is that major moderate landscape harm, it really is quite limited within the wider landscape. We're not talking about long-range views here. It's quite a limited extent within the wider landscape that that harm occurs. The cumulative highway impact assessment was undertaken with the scheme for 269 dwellings to the north. And just to run through the improvements that were identified as needed are for pedestrians and cyclists at 2 key junctions in Claydon. So we've got Norwich Road, Station Road there, and Norwich Road, Church Road, Claydon Junction. So here we have the Church Lane, Claydon Junction, the Crown Public House, some of you may know, and the existing zebra crossing. And just to show that there are improvements to pedestrians to improve their kind of safety for crossing this road here, and a new footway widened, and the tree which will be retained, just the canopy raised slightly just to ensure there's a visibility display, just to improve those facilities for pedestrians and cyclists on the basis that there will be some increased traffic from this scheme, but obviously this scheme has a more marginal increase in traffic compared to the cumulative amount with both applications. And here we have the Station Road, Norwich Road Junction in the centre of Claydon. And here we have, again, some improvements for off-carriageway cycle junctions and pedestrian crossing points, just to help improve those facilities for pedestrians and cyclists. But as members will note from the report, the Highway Authority and officers are content that the proposals will not lead to an adverse impact on the severe adverse impact on the highway network, and will lead to no loss of highway safety for pedestrians, cyclists, and any other road users. And one final improvement, which is secured through the highway mitigation measures through the Section 106, is this relocation of 30 mile an hour speed limit. That is more so in relation to the scheme to the north, but just to point out that this scheme obviously is contributing to all of those highway improvements. So I just wanted to go through the previous resolution to refuse with members, just to try and draw out what's in the more recent committee report. Like I said earlier, we do need to consider the current proposals against the current development plan, which includes Core Strategy Policy 9, which looks to have 30 dwellings per hectare on development sites to try and make best use of land, but whilst considering what's appropriate, thinking about the context, the character of the surrounding area. Also, the National Planning Policy Framework, you'll see in tabled papers, just to draw members' attentions to those two paragraphs in the NPPF, 117, 122, that look to advise authorities to make the best use of land when developing, whilst also having considerations for other matters such as appropriate design, character, what is the surrounding density of development, what would be suitable. But there are those two paragraphs officers do have in mind when they think of how development should come forwards on this land. We do need to make sure that we make the best use of land whilst balancing out all the other considerations such as design and amenity. As I mentioned, the emerging joint local plan, it has limited weight at present. It does give us that direction of travel, and it shows us that this site it is a site which has been identified to accommodate some of our housing requirements, and it is considered to be obviously a sustainable location to help us meet that growth target. But the policies themselves, the precise wording, obviously aren't tested as yet at the examination, so that's why we can't give them anything more than limited weight at present. And then finally, in the committee report, members will note the proposed reason for refusal on loss of amenity for construction traffic. This is something officers have considered in detail since the last committee meeting. And we have had in mind the appeal that the council had in at Tufts Road for 126 dwellings. And this was a reason for refusal, concern over the impact of additional traffic accessing the site via 2 access points because of loss of amenity from that additional traffic. And as members will see in the committee report, the inspector did not consider that that was a sufficient reason to refuse the development, because it is hard to demonstrate that there would be a significant and demonstrable harm in terms of loss of amenity from those residents. That doesn't mean that those residents won't notice there will be additional traffic. The area character would change with this proposed development here in Claydon from the additional vehicle movements to and from the site. But the test for if we're considering refusing the planning application is obviously is there significant and demonstrable harm that would be an adverse impact on amenity. And we don't reviewing how the decision, the reason for refusal and played out at appeal, we don't feel that there is sufficient evidence or level of harm in this instance from these proposed car movements to substantiate a reason for refusal on that basis for amenity here. So officers' advice is that bearing in mind we have had a reduction in the number of dwellings and the applicant has responded positively to the previous committee resolution, and just bearing in mind the other kind of appeal experiences that we have on this particular matter, we don't feel that it would be a strong reason for refusal, and officers do advise against pursuing that loss of amenity reason for refusal. So just to draw together in summary the whole scheme, we obviously have the harms shown here about the development plan being outside development boundaries, although those policies do have some reduced weight as outlined in the committee report. We do have landscape harm and some loss of agricultural land, but then on the positive side, we do have the new dwellings and the policy required affordable housing being secured through a Section 106 agreement. We are in a sustainable location in the grand scheme of our district. It is accessible, there are access to sustainable transport links, the potential to cycle into key employment locations, as well as access to services in the village and schools. We have a good scheme for ecology mitigation. Space has been made for nature, and there would be an improvement for protected and priority species on the existing use of the land, whilst noting that obviously development will happen. There are positive gains that can be secured through this development happening, and there are a number of improvements secured for the public rights of way and the junction improvements in Claydon that we went through. The recommendation is for approval as set out in the committee report, subject to the Section 106 agreement to agree those matters and the planning conditions. And officers' advice to members is that the proposals, they obviously there are some conflicts with the development plan, but the material considerations of the NPPF lead to officers recommending that the scheme should be approved, because we feel this is a good location to help accommodate our housing requirements, and it meets the requirements of our development plan for the majority of the material considerations. So thank you, Chair. I'll pass back to you.
Thanks very much. Okay, so we'll take questions. What I suggest is, because we've only got Sam here on highways for 25 minutes, could I ask, if you have a highways question, you put your hand up first. If you don't, you put your hand down, and then when we've dealt with the highway questions, we'll then come back to other areas. So, Councillor Guthrie, you're first.
Sorry, I can't get my hand down quick enough. I'm not highways at the moment. I'll come back.
Thank you. Councillor Stringer.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I wanted to thank you for the presentation. I was slightly bemused by the construction traffic statement. You show me a haul route, and I counted how many times an HGV would have to mount the curb, and I got up to 6 before you'd got to the site. So that doesn't affect anyone's amenity or safety. The fact you will have, I mean, I've looked at the figures. To build 67 houses, that's probably 1,000 HGV movements. So that we've got as a condition that we agree the haul routes, plural. I can't see one haul route into this, let alone plural. So if someone could advise me what the haul routes are that we're going to condition as part of that construction method statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stringer.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm just trying to get to a wider plan of the area. We'll get to it shortly.
Can I just say, Councillor Guthrie, just so you know, your camera's on at the moment.
Sorry.
Yes, the haul routes would be conditioned. It would be something we would discuss with the Highway Authority when we come to agree conditions. And perhaps I'll ask Sam just to come in to talk about the process that we would go through to agree those. But the construction traffic, obviously, it is for a relatively short period of time. We need to make sure that it's safe, obviously, that the highway can accommodate those vehicles. And that is something that the Highway Authority have considered through the course of this application. And it's not considered that that would be a reason that we could refuse the development. It is possible for construction vehicles to access the site. Appreciate that there are some there is evidence of parking on the road, you would have seen from the videos, but there are routes that the construction traffic can use to get through into the site and then access to the A14, and that's something which the Highway Authority feel that can be appropriate conditions without that loss of highway safety. Sam, was there anything else you wanted to come in on, just on the concerns that there would be a loss of highway safety from construction traffic routes?
Yes, thank you, Joe. We would make sure that we have requested a construction management plan has been included and conditioned for this site. We would work with the developer to try and find the best route so as that existing residents have the least amount of disruption. Also, if there are any concerns with regard to areas where there will be any curb mounting, etc., then we can look at this with the developer to make sure that if there's, say, for instance, cars parking on a route, we can temporarily ask for waiting restrictions to make sure that the route is clear for HGVs. The route that's on Thornhill Road and also on Ely Drive, they are 5.5 metres. So 2 HGV vehicles can pass, not fast, they are slow, but we will be talking again to the developer to make sure that any deliveries are programmed to try and reduce the amount of HGVs passing each other on those roads, because as you say, we want to make sure the pedestrian and the existing residents' safety is paramount.
Okay, did you want to come back? Yep.
Yes, I did. There was no mention of residential amenity in that. I mean, frankly, I was expecting to see the haul route coming in on the other allocation, and none of this existing estate. I cannot believe you could pass 2 45-foot trailers on that estate safely. let alone a 45-foot trailer and a car. I'd just quite like to see the drawing before I assent to this.
Well, as we've said, we've asked for this to be conditioned. We would make sure that the haul route is where the least amount of effect on existing residents. So at the moment, myself and Joe have discussed it, whether or not it is on Thornhill and then coming down Church Lane and coming onto Norwich Road. That is the route that where there is less effect on existing residents. But this again will be decided when we have the discharge conditions, where the developer will put forward their proposal. I won't tell them where to do it, where they're going to have their routes. I will look at the routes that they propose, and then I'll recommend if this is an adequate route or not.
Okay, so let me just get this right, because this is absolutely critical. We've had this before. So if it came back that there was no safe route on the existing road network, what happens?
Well, there will be a safe route, because you've got to think
Right.
about the amount of people that have any vehicles coming into there, any removal vehicles. You have bin lorries twice a week, or once a week, twice for another week. So we would ensure that the traffic, the road is suitable for the traffic that's coming onto it.
Okay, and just to clarify, what is the short period of time that this will be guaranteed to be happening in?
Well, it depends on the developer on how quickly they build their homes. So on a past experience, for 60 homes, it can be a year, it can be 2 years. But for 60 homes, it's ordinarily about a year. But that could be a question that you ask the developer.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on to Councillor Mayer.
Thanks, Chair. Sam, one for you, if I may. In your email of the 2nd of March, you state that Ely Road, this type of road, would normally serve 100 dwellings. You then go on and add up the dwellings, including the new development, and that comes to 111. And you then say that this is accessible as shown in the design guide. Can you talk me through about what the design guide says about the limits of number of dwellings on a road? Is there a obviously the guidance is 100. Can this be exceeded by a set percentage, or what's the rationale that's saying that the 111 is acceptable? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. I can confirm that it is a guide, Suffolk Design Guide, that we have for any development within Suffolk. For a minor access road, it actually says residential roads with footways provide direct access to dwellings, normally serve more than 100 dwellings. So we use 100 as our base mark. So that's where we have it. It's normally serve more than 100 dwellings. When it's shared access road, it's a 25 to 50 dwellings, and a major access road is up to 150 to, and can be up to 300. So it depends on the layout of what's in front of us. And for this site, a minor access road is suitable for the number of dwellings that's being proposed.
Yeah, but why? This is it's a guide. 100 is a guide, and you're deeming that we can go over that and that's acceptable. My question is, what are the reasons that you're using to say that in this particular case we can ignore the design guide and have more than 100 dwellings?
Okay, well, on major access road is for a residential road which would normally not serve more than 300 dwellings. A major access road and a minor access road actually for this area is exactly the same dimensions, 5.5 carriageway and 1.8 wide footways on both sides. The main difference between a major and a minor access road is the visibility, forward visibility, and the number of staggered junctions, spacing between junctions. That's where the major change comes. It's the layout rather than the number. So I could say that this is a major access road, but I know it's not at the moment because of the number of dwellings that are on there.
Thanks. I hear the words, but I'm
Thank you.
not sure I understand. Thanks.
Thanks. Councillor Mansell.
Thank you. One of my questions is about public rights of way, which I think might be related to highways. Am I allowed to ask that one now as well or not?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
My first question is on the indicative layout plan. On the access road, it looks like it sort of widens just as it gets into the site. Are they parking places or are they passing places? That is something to do with highways, I presume. Shall I do the other questions as well? Or do you want to take them one at a time?
Let's just take the highways ones first.
Well, the other one is about public rights of way.
Okay, we'll ask the question.
In the presentation, we heard about improvements to the public right of way network. And is there any thought to improve the Slade to be a bridleway, or at least suitable for cycles? And also the link to the Slade from the southern portion of the site. There appear to be two path links to the Slade from that bottom section. Would it be possible to also have pedestrian access from the public open space just to the north of that?
Okay, thank you. Just on the take the questions in turn, the bays here, they would be parking visitor bays. They're not needed, they're not passing bays. The road is wide enough for vehicles to pass each other in the access point here. As for the improvements to the bridleway, I will just have to defer to Sam on whether it could become a bridleway, a cycle route. Certainly, we're looking at upgrading the surfacing of that route to cope with the additional residents who would be using it to walk along. An additional connection from the open space here, the only concern I have about that is that it's quite a mature band of vegetation woodland here at present, so that would lead to the loss of kind of some quite kind of valuable habitat, which obviously forms part of the kind of the biodiversity net gain of that surrounding area, where I think that there certainly are kind of existing gaps here where it makes it well used. This is the quite a well used path at the moment, informal path into the site, and so there would be no loss of kind of vegetation from these connections. So that's the only concern I have about recommending a connection to the footpath at that point.
I'll just come back on that because at the where your blob is there, the little path there, which goes into the corner of the access road for those houses, and just to the north of that, there looks like a thin piece of hedge with a few trees on it. Could there not be a gap there? That isn't a major piece of woodland? We could look into it. Obviously, this is only an indicative plan at present. It's certainly something that we could look into at the reserve matters stage. This is quite a strong field boundary across the site, and from memory, I can't think if there's any gaps in there, but it's something that we could look into just to make sure that we're not agreeing any access points that do lead to a loss of hedge and trees. Is that okay?
Thank you.
So I'm going to come back about the upgrading the Slade to a bridleway.
Yeah.
Hello. Yes, thank you, Councillor. I can confirm that the Public Rights of Way have asked for the surfacing improvements for some of the footways, and I'm just checking on. It's saying widening Byram Bridleway number 9. I'm just checking to see which one that is. There may be a sum of monies that have been agreed with the previous application to improve the Slade, as in the application, the neighbouring one on Byram Church Lane. So I'm just going to check that for you and I'll come back to you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Councillor Guthrie and Councillor Mellon, we've got, I know Councillor Guthrie said she didn't have a highways matter. Councillor Mellon, is yours a highways question?
It is, Chair.
Yep, if you'd like to go next then I'll bring Councillor Guthrie as the first of the non-highway questions.
Okay, thank you. A couple of questions. The junction at the top of Thornhill Road with Church Lane Barham, I just need to understand, is that a direct crossroads into the new estate? Because we're talking about that potentially becoming a sort of a typical route for users to use, and I'd like to know how wide Church Lane Barham is as well.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Yes, the proposals here. Just get the proposals for the There we go. The other application site. It is proposed that this would kind of form a crossroads. Apologies, it's my superimposing of that plan onto the map there might make it look slightly staggered, but certainly that is intended to be kind of a crossroads when that scheme comes forwards. As for the width of Barham Church Lane at present, I don't have that figure before me. I'm not sure if Sam has the information. I know that it is currently bus route. The bus does travel through Claydon. Well, it has in recent years travelled down that route to the main road. But I don't have the figure of how wide Barham Church Lane is itself. Sam, do you have that figure to hand at all?
Thank you, Joe. No, I don't have that figure at hand. I'm just having a quick look on Google, and there is a centre line down the road. And normally with a centre line, it indicates that the road is wider than 5.5 metres. But I don't have that information to hand, I'm afraid. But as Joe said, it is a bus route.
Okay, thank you.
And when it comes to the crossroads, we've got to remember with the proposed development in Barham, the actual crossroads won't necessarily be a crossroad. The priority will be going to the new road, and because the Church Lane, Barham Old Church Lane, will be a dead end, there will be only locals using that route to get basically to their residence.
Yeah, thank you. Chair, I do have another, but it's a non-highways question.
Yeah, well, you might as well keep going because we've had all the highways questions. Then we'll bring Councillor Guthrie in next.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask the officer. You've mentioned the Tufts Road appeal in I as being sort of material in terms of comparative with this case, but looking at the detail in the package, the Tufts Road one had 2 accesses, and this one has only 1. So can you just sort of explain to me what the relevance is?
Yes, yeah. Let me just quickly go to a slide, just so we can talk around it. This is the Tufts Road application site. So yeah, there are 2 access points on this. On these proposals, and obviously we do have to consider each scheme on its merits, but I think it was worth drawing this appeal into this debate just because I think there are some parallels, and there are 2 access points through existing kind of residentials that are currently cul-de-sacs, so similar to this situation, and the proposals here were for 126 dwellings, and it was considered that that wasn't sufficient enough to lead to that loss of amenity, and obviously the proposals before members today were looking at 67 dwellings. So we're kind of, it's, whilst you can't compare, there's not a cap on the number of dwellings, which then leads to a loss of amenity. Planning obviously isn't such an exact science, but I think it does give an indication that the inspector in this instance felt that broadly with 2 access points for 126 dwellings, there wouldn't be a loss of amenity. So officers kind of drew comparisons from the impact of 76 dwellings from 1 access point. The loss of amenity wouldn't be sufficient to justify that reason for refusal, which is obviously the test that we have to make when determining this application.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Guthrie, thank you for being so patient.
Me? Thank you very much indeed. Probably a silly question really, but whilst this is in outline and we're looking at access at the moment only, can we secure the single-storey dwellings adjacent to Winchester Gardens? I know you said you could secure it in planning conditions, and on page 64 it does say item 2, approved plans submitted in this form application, but I just wonder if we can secure that in case the site gets sold on or anything like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, yeah, we would have in the condition that the areas shown outlined in orange, or whichever colour you want to call this, they would be single-storey development. The applicant is happy to adhere to that condition, and the reason for the condition is to protect the amenity of those adjacent residents. And so we feel that it is a strong and sound condition, and if someone were to try and appeal it, we feel we would have a good justification for imposing that condition. So yeah, certainly it would be in the condition that these areas should be single-storey developments only.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Councillor Warboys.
Yes, thank you. It's a point of clarification, really. In the conditions, you've got on page 65, you've got a phrase energy and renewal integration scheme to be agreed. Does that is that shorthand for the accepting the recommendations of Peter Chisnell? In particular, the requiring a future applicant for detailed planning application, I suppose it would be, to indicate the retrofit measures required and to include an estimate of the retrofit costs for the properties to be developed to achieve net zero carbon.
That is our condition that we would have on, yes, it should be renewable, not renewal, renewable and sustainability, to draw into all those considerations. It's a standard condition that we do recommend in all of our housing schemes, and the precise wording we would work to make sure we have a condition which achieves the best possible sustainability and renewable energy measures possible that we can secure. I don't have the precise wording of the condition to hand at present, but obviously we do need to work within the bounds of what's acceptable, which I do set out in our committee report. We're obviously looking to be more aspirational in the emerging joint local plan, but at present we do need to work within the bounds of what I've set out in, I don't have the paragraph number to hand, but in the committee report before members on renewable energy and sustainability.
Thank you. Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Chair. If I could first just continue that clarification from Councillor Rowland. I think the other words that we've started to include in that condition are concurrent with reserved matters. So are we going to include those magic words in this condition also?
Yes, certainly. Yes, yeah. You would want that information to be designed with the reserved matters stage to make sure that the building orientation fundamentally kind of it reflects the most sustainable kind of energy, passive solar energy gain and such like. So it is a matter that you very much need to discuss at the same time as the reserve matters. It's not something that you can just agree afterwards. So yes, certainly concurrent with reserve matters is what we'd be looking at.
Good, glad we're establishing that. Yeah, my actual question was, do we know whether the adjacent development 20/00674 has commenced, or is that still effectively just a site with permission?
My understanding is it's still a site with permission. Permission was only granted in November 2020 or December 2020, so tail end of last year. There are most likely conditions that need to be discharged. I'm not aware that they have discharged any conditions, but certainly there were no commencements on site for the most recent site photos that I saw.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I don't have any other questions. Sam, can I just thank you for joining us this morning and giving us an hour of your time. Thank you very much.
That's okay. I can actually answer the footpath question now.
Yes,
the bridle way for Councillor Mansell. The request we have put in is for an improvement to bridleway number 9, which actually goes through the site that connects up to not the drift, the main route on the east side of the site, and also improvements to footpath 13 and 14. The actual bridleway itself, as I said, is improvements to that to meet up with Church Lane. That's what the Public Rights of Way team has asked for.
Could I just come back then?
Yes, please.
So that bridleway that I think Sam has just referred to is the one that skirts the northern side of that yellow one on that map, which then it is a bridleway all the way from the housing estate through to Church Lane Barham. That is already a bridleway on my OS map. I know on the thing we've got here, it's got blue dots.
Yeah.
So all the way, it's just like a sweeping curve. You can get to Church Lane. That is a bridleway. So at the moment, there are no plans to make the southern part of the Slade, which goes through to another road. I have no idea what the names of the roads are. Goes all the way through to another road that comes out the back of Claydon. There's no plans to make that a bridleway.
At the moment, the Public Rights of Way haven't asked for any improvements on that at the moment.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks very much. So we'll move on. We don't have a representative of the Parish Council or an objector, but we do have the agent, Richard Martin, who now has 3 minutes to speak to the committee. So if you could turn your camera on, please, Mr. Martin, and your microphone on.
Okay, may I start? Thank you.
Welcome.
Chairman, members, I'm Richard Martin, a director at Scott Properties, and have been leading on this project since work started in 2016. Since the committee meeting in January, we've been working with your officers to address the concerns raised. The number of dwellings has been reduced to 67. The housing mix is amended to now include 10 bungalows or 15% of the homes. These can be built to M42 or M43 accessibility standards as required through reserve matters. On the matter of landscape impact, the number of dwellings backing onto Winchester Gardens has been reduced from 15 to 10. All build form has been pulled away from the boundary to create a wider buffer. The plots which back directly onto Winchester Gardens are now all single storey, removing any potential for overlooking. These measures are set out in the parameters plan and can be secured through conditions. In respect of ecology, the buffers to the site's eastern boundary have been widened, providing additional areas for habitat creation. A biodiversity net gain of 15.9% can be delivered through this development, significantly in excess of the 10% requirement. In terms of highways impact, there would be a reduction in vehicle movements arising from the reduced dwelling numbers. 2 additional visitor parking bays are also shown in excess of the policy requirement in order to reduce the likelihood of on-street parking in the immediate vicinity of the site. On the subject of density, the revised development for 67 dwellings represents a gross density of 19.9 dwellings per hectare. The following gross densities can be found in the surrounding area: 19.6 dph on the consented site immediately to the south, also part of proposed allocation LA 003, 24 along Exeter Road and Hereford Drive, 28 along Ely Road and Winchester Gardens, and 31 proposed for site LA 001 to the north of Claydon. We are grateful to this committee for the detailed feedback provided in January, which we recognise has resulted in a more balanced and generally improved development proposal. Following the reconsultation, this application is again being brought to members with no objections from the technical consultees and with officer recommendation for approval. We believe this application represents a positive development in a sustainable location that will provide benefits for the local area and the district. We very much hope that you will endorse the benefits of the proposal by granting your approval today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? I have one that's not it's not massively important or relevant, but I'm just in our papers it says the applicant is M. Scott Properties, and then it goes on to say the St Edmundsbury and Ipswich diocese. So do I take it the church owns the land and you're representing them? Church of England owns the land.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the site is in 2 ownerships, divided by the hedge line which runs through the southern boundary. So, the southern third. So it's roughly 1/3 is owned by the church, 2/3 by a separate private landowner.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions at all? Any other questions? No. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Okay. We'll now move on to the ward members. We have Councillor Tim Passmore and Councillor John Whitehead. I know Councillor Tim Passmore has emailed to say that Councillor Whitehead is speaking on behalf of them both. So Councillor Whitehead, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, members. Yes, Councillor Passmore can't be here today, but he's happy for me to speak on his behalf. And equally, as the Claydon Parish Councillor, my fellow parish councillors are equally content for me to speak on their behalf. So 7 weeks ago, in a full-day session, this committee first approved and outlined 269 new dwellings in Barham. Then, after careful consideration and debate, were minded to refuse this application 18-00861 for an additional 73 dwellings on this Ely Road site. It was very clear to anyone viewing that committee meeting that you committee members had some real concerns about this Ely Road Claydon development. The reasons why you are so minded to refuse this application is set out on page 14 of the new report. And there's one theme running through that paragraph, which can be summed up in one word: traffic. That word traffic appears 5 times in that short paragraph. Can I just say that both myself and Councillor Passmore as ward members along with the parish council and many residents that I've spoken with, all wholeheartedly agree with the conclusion that you came to regarding the traffic impact in that January meeting. But of course, the 27th of January wasn't the end of the matter. It was only a minded to refuse decision, with the committee instructing officers to negotiate a lower density of development. You were signalling that some lower density of development could be acceptable to you as a committee. So I guess the big question in my mind now, and I suspect in the mind of residents watching this virtual meeting, is whether you as a committee are as totally underwhelmed as we are with the negotiated reduction of just 6 houses. The report on page 14, I quote, says, the application has subsequently been amended with the proposed number of dwellings reduced from 73 to 67 dwellings, representing a 10% reduction in the number of dwellings proposed. Now, by any normal calculation, a reduction of 6 on 73 as a percentage is 8.2%, which we rounded to 8%, not to 10 or 9%. So let's first clearly acknowledge this reality. The negotiations have resulted simply in a mere 8% reduction. Now, I'm wondering what percentage reduction you were anticipating. Obviously, there's no process here where I can get individual answers from you now, but perhaps that will become apparent during the debate. Personally, I would have been disappointed with any outcome below 25%. A drop of a quarter, 25%, could be described as a real change, not just some half-hearted tinkering to the number. 25% reduction would have reduced its application to 55 dwellings, would have started to make some real, albeit still modest, reductions in the traffic impact that you clearly identified back in January. At the last meeting, I described the traffic situation on the roads within the Claydon Garden estate as this 1960s development between the site and the village centre is called. In paragraph 6.12, the traffic implications concentrate on, again I quote, the development would lead to delays at 2 key junctions in Claydon. Now, as I tried to explain at the last meeting, the residents' main concern is not at these junctions. We're actually quite a polite lot in Claydon who are fairly happy to queue for a few seconds more at a junction. Our main traffic concern is the fact that with so much on-street parking, most of these estate roads regularly become unpleasant obstacle courses, and Edinburgh Gardens in particular can best be compared to a downhill slalom ski course. We weave our way from one side of the road to another as we pass parked cars, squeezing into tight gaps to graciously let through oncoming traffic. And unless you drive a high SUV, it's very difficult, once you nipped into one of these small gaps between parked cars, to know where the next small gap is. So when we set off on the wrong side of the road in search of the next refuge, we occasionally find ourselves on the wrong side for much longer than we anticipate, causing irritation and road rage in those who believe their right of way has been impeded. And of course, things get even worse at school drop-off time and collection time in both Edinburgh Gardens and York Crescent. Social media is full of it, even suggesting that York Crescent be made a one-way street. The social media describes the chaos and the gridlock, the stress and the anger, the near misses and the rude gesticulations. So here I'm not just describing some apocalyptic future after this application has been approved. I'm talking about the current status quo before we add the 1,000+ HGV construction movements. I've described an everyday normal day in the Claydon Garden estate. So for my residents, the number of new houses that are tolerable on this proposed development is actually a big fat 0. Dropping the number from 73 to 67, as I said earlier, is just merely tinkering around the edges. So frankly, it's an insult. Members, I hope you share our anger. In my view, in the view of Councillor Passmore, in the view of the parish council, and I believe the vast majority of local residents, the reasons for refusing the 73 dwellings on this beautiful site outside the village boundary, which is so clearly set out on page 14 of the papers, applies just as strongly to this marginally reduced application for 67 dwellings. It's gone down by 8%, but what remains, still a whopping 92% of the original, is still way, way, way too many. Members, I do hope you'll agree. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for the ward member at all? Yeah, we've got a hand up from Councillor Guthrie.
Thank you, Chair. I see the lovely picture of poppies behind you, but what's actually on this quality land? What's grown on it normally, please?
So I'm not a farmer. I just see sort of green stuff occasionally. But I think to be honest, I think back for the last several years since it's been proposed as a site for housing by the owners, they haven't done much farming as such on it, which is why it became such a beautiful boundary to the village. As you see the poppy field, this was taken probably just under a year ago, around May time last year during lockdown, when it's a nice sort of outlet for people just to have a short walk away from the village and
yes,
take in this beautiful
thank
site.
you, Councillor Whitehead. I think I just wanted to know what the quality land was being used for. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Stringer.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This part of this site is in allocation LA 003 in the joint local plan. And in the joint local plan, that is for 75 homes. Has the parish council objected to this? And if you haven't, what percentage of this site is it of LA 003? i.e. LA 003 is saying we'll do 75 houses. I believe this site is only a portion of LA 003. I'm just trying to work out how much over the allocation number in the joint local plan this density represents. Thank you, Chair.
Do you have those numbers? If not, we can bring Joe Hobbs back, who probably can help.
I prefer to revert to the officer on that, to be honest.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The emerging allocation identifies 75 dwellings. The two proposals, the scheme that has been permitted of 9 dwellings to the south and 63 here, leads to a total of 76 dwellings, with further land obviously to the north still within that allocation. It's as I mentioned earlier to members in the presentation, we can't really get into a kind of an examination of the emerging site allocation through this. It hasn't been tested yet at the examination, and certainly it's difficult to start to plan this site to the north here. If you can see on the screen now, the allocation, this site to the north here, because this site does have some constraints in landscape terms, in heritage terms. We have Barham Hall here, and it's difficult to say precisely how many dwellings could come forwards on that site, but it's not really a matter that we can debate in this committee. In terms of the numbers on the allocation, because we can only give the joint local plan limited weight at present, it is difficult to say that that is a reason that we should be refusing this number of dwellings on this site. We have to make an assessment against the current development plan, which is the proposals on design, amenity, density in our core strategy. If it is proposed that the allocation wants to achieve 12 dwellings per hectare across the whole allocation, which is what the 75 proposed across the 6 hectare site, if I remember the 6 correctly, but it's definitely 12 dwellings per hectare. If that's what the allocation wishes to do so, that is a matter that we would place weight on once the allocation becomes more part of the development plan, and we can place weight on it. But at present, because it hasn't been tested, we don't know whether an inspector or whether the kind of that will pass all the requirements of the examination. That's why officers have recommended that we have to look towards the current development plan. I appreciate that it would be you'd rather kind of have the clarity as to whether what the allocation, that the allocation decides this and that's what we want to come forwards on this site. But like I say, we have to make the recommendation now based on the current development plan, and that's what officers have done so in their report.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Eburn, you have a question.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Whitehead, for your representation. I just wanted to ask, I understand Claydon doesn't have a neighbourhood plan. Has there been discussions of having one? And secondly, with regards to this particular proposal, has there been a open house consultation in the village? Thank you.
Right. Well, in terms of neighbourhood plan, the fact is that Claydon, Barham, and really Great Blakenham together are one big blob as such. And any neighbourhood plan, it was always seen, would sensibly need to involve Claydon, Barham, and Great Blakenham. Efforts were made about several years ago to try and get this off the ground. And unfortunately, it did just grind to a halt because, first of all, Barham didn't want to get involved. And well, there's a long story which you probably don't want to hear, but they, despite some best endeavours of a valiant few, including myself, we were never able to get a neighbourhood plan to get any traction there. And sorry, your second question was?
It was just the extent of consultation of this particular site. Thank you.
For a long time, this site has almost been eclipsed by the 269, adjacent or above Barham Church Lane. So it was always sort of, so much of the focus in the village was always on the bigger site, where there was lots of consultation, village hall meetings, etc. And I think that one came forward in 16 or 17, and then this one has come forward in 2018. And I say, really, all the way along the line.
The question
all the way
all
the way along the line. This application has really been eclipsed by the much bigger one.
Yeah.
I think
so the consultation on this site was the question.
Yeah. It sort of ran in together. There has been, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the ward member? No. Okay. Now, we traditionally, we should always have a break. I always believe every 90 minutes, and I think it wouldn't be good to have sort of two speakers because we're now into debate, about to go into the debate. So rather than have two speakers and then break, I think what we'll do is we'll take a break now and start again at 11 o'clock in 12 minutes time. So everyone can just quickly stretch their legs, take a comfort break, and we'll start the debate and reaching a conclusion at 11 o'clock. Thanks, everyone, and welcome back. So we'll now go, we've heard all the information presented to us by our officers, and also from heard from the applicant or the agent and from the ward member. So members, over to you to discuss, debate and to reach a conclusion on this application. Who would like to go first? Councillor Mayor.
Thanks, Chair. My concern when we discussed this last time was access, and that really hasn't gone away. To have 67 dwellings and one entrance seems to me ridiculous. You know, is it so far-fetched for that entrance to be blocked and then an emergency vehicle can't get through? No, I don't think it is. I do have some notes from after the last one. I went to the design guide, and there is a comment there that cul-de-sac serving such number of houses, over 50, must have a footpath that links with other road networks. Well, there is no secondary link. Relying on a link that might go through the north of the site at some point in the future, well, we're not discussing that. We're discussing this application. And this application, access, does not have sufficient access to keep those people safe. So I'm mindful for refusal purely on that. Thank you.
Councillor Caston, then Councillor Muller.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so there has been changes to this application since the last one. I do welcome the single story on the back of the houses there, because I thought the overlooking was a very serious problem with this. I agree with Councillor Mayor. It does come down to the access for me. I totally agree with everything he said just then. The Barham Church Lane, we discussed the width of that road, and that's not a 5.5 metre road. I've done a quick Google Earth look at that, and I think it's about 5 metres. I do travel up and down that road quite regularly, and traffic does have to stop to let other cars through. That's a big issue, because there's two accesses to this. There's up Barham Church Lane and there's Edinburgh Gardens. Edinburgh Gardens, completely agree with Councillor Whitehead. It's a slalom course through there. The cars have to constantly give way to other cars, but looking at the use of the land is quite a big part of this for me. It is agricultural land. The picture with the poppies is a field of rape, and a treatment for those poppies hasn't been put on that field. So that's where the poppies have come from. That's kind of a failure of intensive farming, but not really a failure for the environment and the wildlife on there. But it is on Google Earth a wheat field. But it comes down to the usefulness of that land. It's a 2 hectare field and a 1 hectare field. It's kind of landlocked if the ownership of the field going on to Barham Church Lane is with another landowner, because you can see quite clearly that access that field's taken through Barham Church Lane. There is access through the same access we're looking at for this planning application, which obviously would not be ideal farm machinery travelling through Ely Road and around that way. So for a 2 hectare and a 1 hectare field, it's a very inefficient way of producing crops. It's a lot of carbon for your output, and it's quite near to houses. So for me, those fields aren't massively useful. But I don't think that this really comes down to that. I think this comes down to, is it is that access suitable for this development? And I agree with Councillor Mayer in saying that I think there's serious problems with that access. So I'll listen to debate, and thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'm just going to bring in Philip Isbell, who's just put his hand up, probably to comment on that point.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, just so members, I think take this forward as the right way. Can we start off? I mean, Councillor Mayer talked about footpath connections, and I'm quite keen we just clear what the links are here. Now, there's obviously the vehicular link into Ely Road, so we know that. We've got the bridleway runs across the top of the site, doesn't it, Joe? And then there's, sorry, Joe, if you could just highlight where the bridleway is, which I think we talked about surfacing improvement. And then there's another plan you've got actually, which has got these on, I believe. And then there's the footpath connections here as well. And this site does have connectivity into the bridleway, does it not? Which in turn links into the rest of the estate at the point where you've got your cursor there. So in very simple terms, there are two egress points into the estate there at the very least. In addition, presumably one will be able to route through to the bridleway across the top of the site and connect onwards from there. And that looked from the photographs you had up, Joe, of being fairly well used, running north, northwest, southeast. So I think members do need to give consideration to how those access points route. And then, Joe, could you get up the Tufts Road plan that you had previously relating to the eye appeal, which is obviously mentioned in the papers? So for members' benefit, you will recall this was recommended for permission and was overturned by Planning Committee at the time. That's an application, I believe, for 126 dwellings. So arguably, if one assumed that traffic might split equally, that would be of the order of a little over 60 dwelling households traffic heading out through each connection point. So we're dealing here with 67 dwellings, and in terms of the position officers take and the advice we'd give to you as a committee, the traffic heading out from that site, assuming that it might split equally, and that is an assumption, would then feed into the adjacent road networks of the estates and go onwards, and was not found to be an issue that was unacceptable to the Secretary of State's inspector, and that's dealt with in paragraph 2.9 of the committee report. And indeed, the inspector acknowledged that where you live in a residential environment such as this, you are to expect and can reasonably expect residential traffic associated with the kind of change proposed. So to take the question of volume of traffic going through this access, I think to deliver the allocation, and going back to the point about the JLP, it's a long way off having any weight that is material to this conversation. There would probably come forward a plan which routed access into this road network, possibly from Sandy Lane Barham, also from Church Lane Barham, and would split traffic out of it. It might well have a volume of houses coming off it. All of that is speculation, but for comparison purposes, committee took a view on this application, and there are comparable factors here around the volume of traffic that might be associated with, and the inspector did not accept that argument.
Okay, can I just bring in Councillor Mayer, because you did raise the point in the beginning. Councillor Mayer.
Yeah, my concern was predominantly emergency vehicles access and a secondary access. Mr. Isbell has pointed out there is that secondary access available, which I had missed. So my concerns have been largely dealt with. Yeah, I'm going to sit and listen to the rest of the debate, but I haven't made any recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mayer. Okay, thank you very much for that. Next up is Councillor Muller.
Thank you, Chair. No, I listened with interest to what colleagues have said on this, and I too had serious concerns about the access, particularly again what Councillor Mayer said for emergency vehicles. But I think Mr. Isbell has sort of clarified the point with regards to this access, and it's something we see on lots of estates around the district. So I'm in two minds on this one at the moment, but I'll listen to what everybody else has to say before I sort of make a decision on this particular application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Guthrie.
Thank you for that. Could the officer put up slide 36, please, which shows us the key benefits while she's doing that? I will say I appreciate the JLP has little weight, particularly with numbers, so it can't be the panacea for us to make a full decision here. But the problem is some members, myself included, have been on the JLP working group, and this site is forward for approval for development of some description at some time. So we've got a conflict that what we've got of knowledge of what might happen, but we've got to look at what's here today. I'd be interested to know about any traffic management plan for the other 9 houses on the other side. I listened to Councillor Field, I've done that again, haven't I? Sorry, John. The ward member. I've listened to him carefully, and I've also listened to Councillor Caston saying it's like a slalom going down there, which happens a lot on such areas. But I have been told when I've objected to some planning applications that no one has the right to park on the highway, which seems quite harsh, but that is a fact. I like the improvements that the applicant has brought forward, particularly the key benefits. I'm comfortable with the landscaping, ecology, sustainability and the affordable homes. And as I questioned earlier regarding the bungalows, I was pleased that the bungalows would not have such an impact on those properties on Winchester Gardens. I too worry about harm. And it is very difficult when you come to planning decisions to demonstrate the harm. And I think we're all in the same boat that where I live pretty rurally, I have local neighbours who have increased traffic and it will cause a harm. But to demonstrate it, to go to appeal, I think would be very hard. And with the I1, we can quite clearly see that although they put up a good fight on that one, an inspector wouldn't use it for an appeal. So I too have concerns about the traffic, but with all the comments that are being made and Mr. Isbell, I will sit and listen because I think slide 36 probably gives us a good benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eburn.
Thank you very much, Chair. When we considered this earlier, one of the things that I'd raised particularly was the landscape buffer. And while I appreciate the changes the applicant has done to ensure we have a slightly wider buffer, there's still, to me, there needs to be a kind of equivalent of a field edge buffer between the housings and the woods area through which the Slade footpath runs. So I appreciate there's more being put in, but it would have been, an incremental metre is, we could do with a lot more than that. And I think with regards to the access and the traffic, I mean, to put it bluntly, the construction of this site is going to be a nightmare for residents. But that's the same situation that's happening in villages all across our district. And, it will be highly irritating to residents in those surrounding roads while this is being constructed. One of the potential things for the future they might want to consider is getting 20-mile-an-hour zones throughout that area and addressing the sort of off-road, on-road parking and so on elsewhere. But that's not something we can add to this application or discuss today. So I'm kind of sitting on the fence because I can see the applicants made changes. The increased amount of bungalows is really good, and they have improved the ecology buffers, although for my mind not quite enough. So I will wait to see what the rest of my colleagues say. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks. Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Chair. The officer didn't really list the loss of amenity as a key harm or even as a harm, I think, but clearly it is some harm. County are not saying that there is no harm. They're saying that it's not bad enough to refuse, which is not an attractive position to take up, in my view, unfortunately. And I think that as we've seen, this is not the allocation. This is a part of the allocation, and I think I have to unfortunately repeat myself from last time that the allocation had 3 access points for traffic, and this has 1. And that is a major problem to me, given that it's tucked away behind an existing estate. I was on the Tufts Road committee that day, and I certainly voted for refusal. I didn't think it was very good. The appeal inspector didn't agree, but it doesn't really persuade me very much that this is better than that. Possibly it's a bit worse than that. Now, it is clearly, it's a sustainable location. Claydon and Barham have got good sustainable links to Ipswich, and there are quite good services in the village as well. So I don't think there's any argument this is a relatively sustainable location from that point of view. The point is, is it going to be satisfactorily developed as a good development? And I think the officer did say that it's for the committee to decide that this is a good development. Well, I'm afraid I don't think it is a good development as before us at the moment. And I did establish in the questions that it remains open to the 2 landowners here to talk to the landowner immediately to the south, who has permission for 9 which have not yet been built, to actually put together a better scheme which would accord more, not 100%, but would accord more to the allocation, which has limited weight, as we know, because it's in the joint local plan not yet adopted. But nevertheless, a better scheme could be brought forward. So at the moment, I proposed refusal last time, and I'm not actually changing my mind about what I think about it at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mansell.
Thank you. I mean, I certainly agree with much of what has been said before. And I do actually find it quite interesting that we had a detailed analysis of the farming land from Councillor Caston for this relatively small piece of land, which I think in the papers and in the presentation we're told that it was grade 3, when rarely we mention it, even when it's grade 2. So I find that quite interesting that was part of the debate. And I certainly don't deny that I think there will be an awful lot of traffic generated from this development, both in the construction phase and once it's finished. And there are an awful lot of tortuous roads with lots of cars parked for people to get in and out of it. But unfortunately, we are where we are, and highways have said it's acceptable. And we've often been in this situation where we as people who live in the real world maybe understand that the residents are going to find it very annoying that they've got an awful lot more traffic. But if highways say it's okay, and when we are comparing this with the application in I, when traffic movements through the housing estate was not deemed to be a reason for refusal, I think if we do refuse this, I think we will be in quite dodgy territory because to all extents and purposes, it's okay. I agree with Councillor Eburn that some concessions have been made, but maybe they're not quite enough. And I think we are actually in quite an unfortunate position, as Councillor Matheson has said, that the other site just to the south of this has already got 9 houses permission. And we also have the vacant plot of land to the north of this site, which also forms part of the allocation in our joint local plan. And now had all 3 of these plots come through together, we could have had more than one access point. But we are where we are. And I think we've got to determine this. And, you know, there have been some concessions. Maybe they could have done a bit more. They could have put a few fewer houses on. But, you know, I feel that there is some movement in the right direction, that the developer is willing to make these concessions. So again, I'm afraid I'm a bit sitting on the fence. I think it is going to be difficult, but I can't see any grounds for refusal. And the one thing I would like to mention is that if we are minded to approve, I would like some sort of informative about making that less than half a kilometre of footpath along the Slade between where it's a bridleway and where it becomes a byway to be upgraded to be a bridleway, because otherwise it's a sort of hole in the public rights of way network as I see it. So I'm not proposing anything, but should we be minded to approve this, I'm wondering whether that could be an informative. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mansell. Philip Isbell's put his hand up, so I'm going to bring Phil in before I go to Councillor Stringer.
Just picking up on a point, I think Councillor Guthrie had raised it. There was a little bit of conversation around it, and just to add some information to it in relation to the adjacent site. So that development of 9 bungalows, as we say, that's got planning permission. There's no discharge of conditions against any of them at the moment. Condition 12, I recall, of that is a construction management plan, which is yet obviously to be agreed. So that was part and parcel of it, and there are various biodiversity measures associated with it. So that decision has taken in some of those things. I'm conscious, and I believe if you look at the local plan submission, it doesn't actually identify any access points for the land. So I think all of that is to be resolved. So I'm not completely sure that access is in any way led by the JLP draft allocation. But understanding that there is an offer of 15% biodiversity enhancement here, and that this is a matter which I think, as Joe was saying, exceeds what will be required within the JLP's policy. I do wonder, we've currently got conditions on that, and I don't know if I could bring Joe in just to comment as to whether or not that might, to give members some confidence in it, might more usefully be locked into the Section 106 obligation as a way of making sure that that 15% is actually achieved. Because to benchmark that, we'd doubtless take advice from Sue Hooton and Place Services. But perhaps, Chairman, if with your permission, I might ask Joe to comment on that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, the applicants have submitted a report from their consultants demonstrating that 15.89%, to be precise, biodiversity net gain could be secured, and we haven't yet kind of gone through the process we would do to discharge condition to check all that information out. But the applicants are certainly confident that they can meet that level of 15% biodiversity net gain, and so it's something which we could place in the Section 106 agreement with further discussion with the applicants, just to give it that kind of certainty and security that enhancement would come forwards. And hopefully that kind of gives members that kind of comfort that there really would be something kind of quite good about this site, that it does deliver over and above where we are going with the Joint Local Plan and the Environment Bill when it comes to biodiversity net gain. So that is something that we could do if members were minded to seek that and minded to approve. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I've got 4 more speakers, and I'll give my thoughts on it. Councillor Stringer.
Thank you, Chair. This is one of those. Oh, hang on a second. That's better. This is one of those sort of cleft stick situations. We're sort of damned if we do and damned if we don't. I just want to first of all make a few comments about highways in criticism, and then offer some support. It is always annoying when the real world is sketched out in terms of highways terms, because the two never seem to meet. We know that we're not really allowed to use a lot of data in terms of the construction, because technically someone could build these all with a wheelbarrow. They won't. They'll be using an enormous amount of heavy goods vehicles to do it, which is why I was asking the questions early on. I would certainly expect, if this development were approved, that it would only use one of those entrances. To introduce a heavy goods vehicle into Edinburgh Gardens, something 45 foot long, tractor unit, would be utter ridiculous. So I mean, I can't believe that we can't stand up to that. But of course, the only problem with this is the bar that the highways team have to work to is set by government, and that bar is so incredibly high. It demonstrates that you have to almost prove someone is highly likely to get seriously injured before you can do anything. And frankly, I think the government, if we want to see what we believe is sustainable development, I think the government needs to lower that bar somewhat, because it is too high at the moment. We are in a bit of a Mexican standoff here. We see a lot of these where you've got, in a perfect world, if you were master planning this, you would master plan all three landowners all at the same time to use proper entrances, and there'd be a haul route in here for the construction phase. Job done. You've then minimised the amount of hassle to everyone and the loss of residential amenity. There will be loss of residential amenity either way with this allocation to those residents on that estate. And that's very, very sad. And it's our duty to see if we can minimise it as much as we can. But we are also dealing where government does give us a fig leaf, where they allow us, if we want to master plan things, to invoke something called a neighbourhood plan, which we haven't got here. And we have now got case history here in Mid Suffolk where there is a made neighbourhood plan. We can resist inappropriate development. But we then go to the joint local plan. The joint local plan has very little weight, but it shows the direction that Mid Suffolk has told the government we're going to go. And this site has been put well within that. So if this site were not to be in that, we would then need to find some elsewhere to prop up the numbers. Again, we've promised to government. So, but if we ignore the joint local plan, we're back with a core strategy and a suite of documents that would be deemed out of date by the MPPF and would tip a tilted balance. So you would just have to demonstrate the harm. So if I now have to demonstrate the harm, this is the nub of it. My common sense tells me there is a demonstration of harm, potential harm here. But the evidence I have is absolutely zero from any of the consultees. So as much as I would want the sensible thing to happen, which is this have more than one access, the tiny crumb I've got from here is this site does not preclude the ability to have another access on the next piece of land next door. And because that's there, I have nothing for which I can push back and refuse this application. But I think it's a sad state of affairs that sustainable locations like this have to rely on not precluding to actually try and plan out their planned future. So that's where I am, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Norris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too still have some reservations regarding this application. The impact of the cumulative developments in the area on the local infrastructure. On page 35 of the papers, NHS England state that there's only one branch surgery within 2 kilometres, and this does not have sufficient capacity. Suffolk Wildlife Trust at the top of page 36 expressed concerns at the possible loss of hedgerows and the general lack of information in the application on this point, and they state that a habitats regulations assessment would be required. Suffolk Police have mentioned a number of concerns on page 37 regarding security aspects within the indicative layout, and I don't see their recommendations reflected in the conditions listed on pages 64 and 65. I also still have concerns regarding the indirect routes through the existing residential routes to the single access point for traffic for this proposed development, and the possibility that access for emergency vehicles could be impaired in the event that there was an incident. At the moment, I'm not inclined to support this application. However, I will listen to the rest of the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mellon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my colleagues have sort of covered a lot of what I was going to say, but I will just touch on a couple of points. Clearly, this key issue here is the highways and the access, and we have highways as a statutory consultee saying that it wouldn't be a problem. I do find it interesting from the papers, we're told the development would achieve safe and suitable access to the site, but the officer was unable to tell us which route that would be achieved by. But because they have said it's okay, we understand an appeal would be difficult to defend. But I really have a struggle with this whole idea that a construction management plan could be so finessed, could be so programmed that deliveries would have little or no disruption to existing road users. I just in the reality of construction, I just can't see that happening. The officer held out the slight possibility of a secondary access to the north of the site if that northern sort of section of the allocation came forward. It seems to me this plan is not the only possible way that this site could be developed. And I think it would be possible to say not this and not to say never on this site. But we're in a really difficult kind of pinch point here where we don't have the grounds easily to refuse it. But I'll continue listening to the debate. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. And Councillor Warboys.
Lovely. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I find my personal judgment on this swinging one way and the other. I certainly think the impact on the residents in the short term is going to be quite awful with HGV traffic, and in the long term, there is going to be further impact because of traffic movements.
Councillor Warboys, could I ask you to turn your camera off and see if that improves, because you keep cutting in and out, and maybe that will improve.
Oh, sorry, I'll move my headphones about a bit. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I think the case officer, Joe Hobbs, has done a great deal of work, good presentation, and I think Scott Properties have moved as well. They have improved the biodiversity. A metre is not really a great deal, but it does have a significant effect. It would be nice if it was 2 meters. The number of houses has been reduced. There's been a reduction in the size of the homes. There are more bungalows, so that in turn would actually perhaps reduce the number of vehicle movements in the future. This site has been allocated for future development. This is in excess of that proportionally, but it is seen as sustainable for development in the future. There is a bus route. According to the parish council, the buses have actually been reduced, but this isn't fixed, is it? It can be changed. It could subject to demand. There could be an improvement in the bus routes. It is close to the high school. There is pressure on the health centres and local facilities. I am feeling that being realistic, it is possible to approve this development, but I have still got very much concerns about Ely Road being the only access into this cul-de-sac development.
Thank you. Philip Isbell, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Chairman. Just if I may, just thinking about this and just picking up on one point. We have discussed the finely balanced way this looks for members, and I'm reading that from debate. The construction management plan presently sits as a planning condition. If members wish to give it the teeth of a section 106, I'm sure that's possible. I think there's a mixed view about that one. A breach of a condition is easily resolved with a breach of condition notice, whereas a breach of a section 106, a much more onerous thing, is a matter that one takes to court. So there are choices in that about how one achieves that, and one may still say, well, it's not really satisfactory, but it's what we do. I was thinking about the connectivity point that Councillor Mansell had raised earlier, and I'm not sure, Joe, if you've got a photograph of the sector of, it must be the southeast corner of the public open space that's proposed, and if you could just highlight that area. I mean, it seems to me that we have a condition requiring respect for the parameters plan. That's, I think, the third condition down on the list of recommended conditions. It would seem to me possible to include a condition which would look for a connection to the public rights of way, to the public right of way there from the public open space in some in the submission of reserved matters for that area, because I fully suspect that the Mark I human being will probably try and create that anyway. So I think it will be more prudent to do it in a managed way and to do that at a point with least effect. So going back to Councillor Mansell's comment made much earlier in this meeting, I think that's something that we could additionally consider. Councillor Mansell talked about the suggestion of an additional informative regarding the upgrading of the footpath to a bridleway. That obviously is a Highways Act matter, not something we can comment on here, but I think an informative to that effect is useful, and creating these connections will at least make this will enhance the sort of the good design elements of a place in its ability to connect into the locality. So I don't know if those are useful thoughts, Chairman, within the debate.
Thank you. I have no other hands up, so I also agree entirely with Councillor Stringer and Mansell. We are in a position where you've got 67 dwellings, or you've seen a reduced number of dwellings come forward. We've seen the bungalows and the affordables, which are what we wanted and what we're pleased to see. We've seen the ecology buffers increased, and so we've asked them to go away and come back and make changes. And to be fair, they have relocated the single storage. They've done lots of things that we have asked. And the question is about access to the site, and that access to us, or to me, feels wrong. The problem is that in a similar type scenario, accepting that there were two entrances, but there or thereabouts, I don't think we can turn this down on the reasons of access, because we haven't, as Councillor Stringer said, we don't have the evidence. So this isn't ideal. This isn't something I'd be proud to support. This isn't something I think is ideal, but I cannot find any reasons to turn around and vote against this that would be acceptable if it went to appeal. And I think we'd lose, and I think it would be so that my view is that I will be supporting this. It's certainly not what I want to do. It's with a heavy heart. It doesn't make me feel that it's the right decision, but I can't find any other reasons not to refuse it. So that's where I'm at the moment. So I will be supporting this application with a heavy heart. Councillor Guthrie.
Yeah, well, I've heard, I think you've summed it up. I think you've summed up everybody's feelings. And it is, again, with a heavy heart that I will propose the recommendation, but with the addition that if we can make an informative, as suggested by Councillor Mansell, which I hope will be acceptable to her. So that's where I am. Thank you.
Thank you, and Councillor Muller.
Thank you, Chair. Having heard the debate completely now and listened to all the arguments for and against this proposal, I am happy to second Councillor Guthrie's proposal to recommend for approval on this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Councillor Mansell.
Thank you, Chair. Seeing as Philip Isbell picked up on a couple of points that I raised, I thought I'd like to thank him for that. Yeah, I agree. I think that people will find a way through that little bit of hedging in that corner of the open space. So if we can formalise that and make that a proper access point into the footpath for Slade. And yes, I would welcome an informative. I mean, it is only about half a kilometre that is still a footpath, because the southern end of that path, I've looked on the OS map, leads through to what I think is Church Road or something. And it becomes a byway. So, you know, it's half a kilometre. It would be wonderful if we could make that accessible for bikes and horses as well as pedestrians, because that actually really will enhance the public right-of-way network. So given that those are going in, I think I will be supporting this proposal that Councillor Guthrie's made. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Mansell. Councillor Matheson, then Councillor Stringer.
Yes. I'm wondering how we don't seem to be losing appeals these days, and I can't. I have a heavier heart than the chair. I'm afraid I really cannot support what I consider to be such poor development, and I just wonder whether if we were to refuse this, whether the applicant would choose between talking to the people that own the land to the south or going to appeal, and I think it's a risk worth taking. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stringer.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think there would be another risk, of course, to refusing this as well, is that they come back with the original scheme and take that one to appeal. So the risks go both ways in all of this, and I've seen enough risk go wrong and go the wrong way for me to come. I'm not comfortable about supporting this in its current. I'm not comfortable, but I just don't have enough to stack up what I would consider even a tissue of a refusal here. What I would ask the proposer, in fact, I hadn't realised it had been proposed, if the proposer and seconder to consider putting the HGV, the construction plan into that section 106, rather than rely on a condition that may or may not be complied with. And we could here rule out today that no construction traffic should go through that Edinburgh Garden route, because I think that, you know, that we should do that as a minimum. Then it all then comes in on the shortest route, on the shortest way through this estate, and it doesn't take that labyrinth that takes it all the way through all those wiggly roads. I think that's the least we should do, and with that I would just be supporting it, but it would be a heavy heart. Could I also put an informative note on that if we do approve this today, this council doesn't put out a glowing press release?
Yeah. Well, that sits with the chair of the committee, Councillor Stringer. But I hear what you say. Okay, so can we just come back on that point that Councillor Stringer raised, please?
No, I wouldn't be prepared. Oh, hang on a minute. I've got builders out here. I wouldn't be prepared to add that, because if you listen to Sam, she said it was not up to her to decide the route. And what she would do is listen to the route that the applicant offered and then consider whether it was safe or not. So I wouldn't be prepared to add that on.
Then can I come back, Chair?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, then I am forced into changing my mind, and I will be speaking against this application now, because it hasn't been demonstrated to me in a plan that there's a safe route. and it's not going to be built into that section 106, and I can demonstrate harm. So therefore, I now have the evidence because I don't have it in the section 106. I will be voting against this planning application, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Philip Isbell wants to come in.
Thank you, Chairman. There have been various points I've mentioned through the course of this debate, and we've now got a number of informatives and other points. And as I recall, Councillor Stringer had asked two questions, one of them whether the construction management plan would go into the section 106, and the second one was about whether construction traffic would go into Edinburgh Gardens. Now, Chairman, we've obviously heard from Sam this morning, and I believe, as I understood Councillor Guthrie, she was not minded to include the Edinburgh Gardens point within the wording of this. I may have this wrong, and please do correct me. I'm not sure I got to. That is still an option. And Chairman, you will recall earlier in the debate I talked about locking in the biodiversity net gain elements within the section 106 rather than as presently sits within the conditions, and that's possible if members so wish it. And I'm happy to take. I think all of these changes might need me to take them away for 5 minutes with Joe just to put the wording down to present back to members for your comfort that we're clear what we're talking on.
So what about the construction point that's been made in terms of the route?
So is
that doable or not doable? So I know it's up to Councillor Guthrie because she's proposed it, but I'm just so we have clarity about what can and can't be put in.
My suggestion is that if you leave this as a condition and you include that as a requirement within the wording of that construction management plan, so that it is an express requirement that there is no construction traffic shall use Edinburgh Gardens, which I think is what was talked about, then if that's not acceptable, the applicant can make an application to vary that condition, and you can consider that on its merits. So you get a second bite at that very specific question. And to my mind, that's a perfectly acceptable way forward. You've heard what Sam had to say, you know what you know, and you're minded to refuse. I think you create a condition there where you've set out an expectation, and if they want to make the case that they must use Edinburgh Gardens, then that's their case to make, Chairman. So there's a number of little points that washed out here. Before you actually move to a resolution, I would like to do some tidying so that we are clear what is being voted on, but I'll leave it there now.
Yeah.
Can I come back?
Of course you may.
Councillor Hicks, I'm more comfortable with Mr. Isbell's suggestion, but I don't think we should be prescriptive. So he said leave a condition with the wording in the construction plan. Does that sound more acceptable? He was going away to work on it. I'd be happy with that, but I don't think we can dictate what route it takes, is my view on it.
Okay. Anyone else wish to come in? Councillor Stringer, you want to come back?
Yeah. Can I just say what I was trying to achieve was dictating which route it didn't take. And because I was only offered 3 possibilities, it puts me. The interesting thing is the presentation we had also didn't show us the full way out of Edinburgh Gardens on the little video. I know that area. It is chaos through there. To take a small DPD delivery or post office delivery van is bad enough. If you got a 45-footer in there, you would have gridlock, and it's that acknowledgement that if we were to do that, it would be fantasy trying to get an HGV through there. So I say I was trying to head it, the other way.
So Philip, I think you've heard the way how we want that worded between Councillor Stringer and Councillor Guthrie.
So
to
just
accommodate that, please.
So just so I think I have that clear, that we're not dictating route, but we're saying that there shall be no construction access within that condition. No construction access through Edinburgh Gardens, I believe, is the point I'm hearing, as an amendment to the condition as worded. And the other element of the proposal, as I understood it, was that there will be the informative that Councillor Mansell has raised regarding upgrading of the adjacent footpath to a bridleway as a request to the County Council. Chairman, do you wish me to formalise this with some wording so that Mr. Carmichael could then put that into?
I mean, to me, it sounds quite clear. I mean, you've just covered the points from where I sit. I'm quite happy. Does anyone else wish to come in?
Is the seconder happy with that, please?
Yeah,
Councillor?
Yes, I'm happy with that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Anything, Councillor Stringer, you still have your hand up? No. Sorry.
I do. I just wanted just for, it's all about getting the information to the members. I've just brought up Claydon on a Google thing so I could look at a map and navigate myself around this area. While Philip's tidying up, I would encourage the members, if they want to look at access, pull it up on a map and navigate your way using other providers are available other than Google. Have a little go on the map and look, if you don't go the shortest route out of there, how you would navigate it. It is a complete labyrinth. I'll just encourage you to spend 5 minutes before you make it.
I mean, I think, yeah, thank you for that. Okay, so Philip, do you need a couple of minutes, or are you happy that we move on?
Chairman, I think so. In essence, to put this as simply as possible, there's a condition recommended, which is construction management plan. I would suggest an amendment to that, which is to add to that wording in, which is a bullet about a third of the way down the list of conditions. No construction traffic access via Edinburgh Gardens, and leave that text there. And the other point was Councillor Mansell's informative requesting the upgrade of the adjacent footpath to Bridleway as a matter for the County Council. And
okay,
lovely.
Chairman. Thank you very much. Okay, so we've got the recommendations on page 24 and 25 and 26 of our papers, along with those two additions that we've just heard read out. And I'm now going to go to the
Chief question, Chair.
Oh, right. Sorry, John. Yeah, I missed that. Yeah. What's your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify with Mr. Isbell at what state the applicant has offered us M42 and M43 on the building regs. We have to include that in the planning permission, but I'm not clear which stage, to make sure we don't need it at this stage as a condition, please.
Philip.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to take the liberty of drawing in Joe at this point in relation to where we might add that.
Yes, yeah, no, thank you, Councillor Matheson. I think it would be at this outline stage, and the applicant certainly has indicated they're happy to have that condition. So perhaps we could add into the resolution as well a condition, third one, to ensure compliance with those two parts of the building regulations.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, so on that basis, with those three additions and the recommendations on page 24, 25 and 26, I'm going to ask the Governance Officer to conduct an electronic vote.
Updated the recommendation in modern.gov to read out as follows, so that application DC 18-00861 be approved as detailed in the officer recommendation with the additional conditions and informative notes as read out by the Chief Planning Officer. Are you content with that, Chair?
Yes, I am.
And is Mr. Isbell, are you content with that as well, just to be clear?
Yes, so Joe, just for the record, the wording of the Part M42 condition, so that members have comfort around that, that's effectively a requirement for the reserved matters to be in compliance with that. Can you just confirm that for me?
Yes, yeah. So the applicant identified that the bungalows provided on the site would be in compliance with Part M42 and M43 in terms of accessibility. In terms of accessibility building regulations, and so it would relate to the bungalows on site, just to make members clear on how the condition would apply. I'm just quickly checking one note, if you could just bear with me, just to make sure that I have answered that correctly. And
presumably, Chairman, you'll want the proposer and seconder to be comfortable with that.
Yeah. Once we've got it all through.
Sorry, nearly there. Just want to make sure I do give you the right advice as to what the applicants have indicated. Yeah, so it does relate to the single story. The 10 proposed bungalows on site would be delivered to building regulations M42 and M43 standards at the reserved matters stage.
Okay, so Councillor Guthrie, Councillor Muller, you're all happy that we proceed to the vote?
Yep.
Yes, I'm happy, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Robert, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. So if members could please go to the modern.gov app. You may need to log in again, as we have had over 2 hours of inactivity on there. But if you could please, if you haven't got the screen in front, if you could log in. Once you get in, if you could please go to today's agenda and then go to the plus sign in the top right hand corner. From there you'll get a subsection on attendance and voting. Please click on that and that will take you to the voting tab for today's meeting. From there, if you could please choose the light blue line which indicates the vote is in progress. Just waiting on 2 more, Chair.
Everyone okay voting? Anyone struggling? Councillor Warboys.
Oh, I'm waiting very slowly for this to reload. I've crashed out. I'll have to vote.
Anyone else? Should we take a verbal call on that?
Chair, we're just waiting for Councillor. Oh, it's just Councillor Warboys. So if I could take your vote verbally, Councillor Warboys, if that's okay.
Yeah, for approval. Reluctantly.
Thank you, Councillor. So with Councillor Warboys' vote, that makes it 9 votes for and 3 against. So the motion is carried.
Okay. Thanks, members. That was, I think, a particularly difficult one. Okay, so we have no site inspections to report, no other business. So thank you for your time this morning. Enjoy the weekend when it comes, and close the meeting at 11:57. Thank you, everyone, and thanks to the officers.
Thank you.
Chair.